Hjertelig velkommen til et nytt program her på Israelkanalen. Denne gangen så skal jeg ta dere med til Jerusalem, hvor vi skal møte en organisasjon som heter Cry for Zion, og deres to hovedmedarbeidere. Welcome to the program, Doron Keidar.
Thank you.
You are one of the founders of this organization. Can you tell me a little bit more about the work that you do and how it started?
Sure. I would say it started in 2014. That's when we actually started the Cry for Zion organization. And what led up to that was just throughout the years, I noticed the tension, the growing tensions on the Temple Mount. And it really bothered me that I didn't understand what was the big deal. You know, so you would see riots, and we would be with tourists up on the Mount of Olives, for example. I remember one year in year 2000 and something, about 14 years ago, give or take, and one of those classic riots, and they were asking us, what's going on? And I was like, I don't know. They're just, getting angry again, and we don't really know why. And so I recognized my ignorance there. And another real key year was when I was actually guiding a good friend of mine and his family throughout the land of Israel, and he wanted to go to the Mount of Olives where Jesus prayed on Passover, and he prayed, before the crucifixion and so on. And so he wanted to have that experience, and he says, "Can we go up there?" I said, "Sure." At night. So we go up there at night, and he pulls out his flashlight. He's like a tactical guy, he pulls out this tactical flashlight with a high beam, and he just touched the walls, the eastern walls of the Temple Mount. And within minutes, we had border policemen that showed up on scene in the middle of the night. There's nobody there, just us. And then they started to be all, suspicious, like, "What are you guys doing?" and all this. And they were ready for action. And we were just like, "We're not doing anything." And they're just like, "Well, we got a report, so you guys need to get out of here." And we're like, "All right, we're leaving. Everything's cool." And that just, that lit up a light in my head, realizing, wow, there's something very, very serious about this. And I need to research it. I need to understand, why is this such a touchy subject? So.
And the work that you started, tell me a little about the development of that.
Well, I started to go and speak in the United States on speaking tours in different Christian groups typically. And I really felt inspired to talk about the importance of the Temple Mount. As I was researching, like I said, I started to get into it. And I felt inspired to kind of get Christians motivated to take action on the Temple Mount issue. And as I was traveling and speaking, finally I realized, the coin dropped. No, you need to take this up. This is your mission. This isn't somebody else's mission. And so I realized, okay, so now the ball's in my court. I thought I was going to just talk about it and get, Christians inspired about it, and they're going to do something. And so I realized, when I realized it was my responsibility, okay, so what are we going to do? And I think it's just about a year after that speaking tour is when we started Cry for Zion. So we started with a movement, basically, not just an organization, but kind of trying to rally mainly Christians, because we have Jewish organizations who propagate for the importance of the Temple Mount, the Temple Institute, and you can rattle them off. There's roughly 40 well-known organizations here in Israel for Jewish audience. And I realized there's nothing for the Christian audience. And so that's why we felt we need to start a movement. It has to have a petition that basically Christians can rally behind and say, I can stand behind this, which, as you probably know, in Norway, there's many different Christian denominations, opinions, theology on this. So it's not an easy thing to rally so many, different Christian groups on. So my goal was how can I concise it into some simple points that all Christians can agree on and realize, yes, I can stand behind this. So that's what we did in 2014, and have been doing that ever since.
I went up to the Temple Mount the last time I was in Israel, actually in 2019, together with Yehuda Glick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he's going there praying, and in one sense, it's forbidden for Jews to pray there. They're not allowed, but he was, able to do that anyway. Is this a movement that you cooperate with, or you have interactions with? Or?
Yes, actually, I know Jude personally. We've talked with other groups and other organizations. We have kind of like a think tank, if you will, of Jews and Christians trying to help each other understand each other and cooperate with each other for Israel-focused issues. And so we meet quite oftenly in those groups, and I would say I definitely support what he's doing, and I definitely support within our petition. In fact, it's very specific. It says that we're petitioning, the Christian world is petitioning for Jewish prayer on the Temple Mount. So any Jewish organization or individuals who are trying to change the status quo, which is you're forbidden from praying on the Temple Mount, we're definitely supporting them and backing them. But at the same time, the question is how. And I think it's the approach that matters. So I don't support people that will make provocations and prostrate themselves and try to draw attention and then cause a big, stir. So it's all about how you do it, and I think that's very important. And at the same time, that's why the petition is actually petitioning the Israeli government, because that's the how. There's law, there's order, and like you said, Jude has been able to pray up there in 2019, and that's part of the changing of the status quo via the government, via the Israeli police, via the Islamic Waqf. You have to work in cooperation with what's existing there. You don't just come in like a bull in the China shop coming through and saying, we just want our way. It's very sensitive. It's a very sensitive issue, and there's a way and an approach that you can go about it, and that's what we're trying to do. That's literally what we're trying to do, and rally the Christian voice, because we know if it's just Jews who are petitioning for this and trying to say we should have the freedom of worship, that's a small number of people. But when you have the Christian world understanding it's important to us as well, which from the Jewish perspective, it's a house of prayer for all nations. And that's why we actually want to incorporate the nations in our petition to pray on the Temple Mount.
So when we see on social media, for example, a lot of videos where Jews starting to pray on the Temple Mount, and then they get arrested very quickly and are taken away. Right. So this is something that you don't support that behavior? No,
I don't support the provocation, because I support their freedom of worship to do that.
Yeah.
The principle.
Yeah, principle, yes.
But pushing the buck like that, so to speak, it's not helpful. Because here's what happens: the Islamic Waqf gets angry. They're gonna preach to their audience, their Muslim audience who are devout Muslims, and I'm not saying that most Muslims are going to do this, but the ones who are more likely to use violence, who are going to hear the feedback that look what the Jews are doing, look at the provocations, they're going to take action, and they're going to use their theological justification for attacks. Which, by the way, just 2 weeks ago we had 2 attacks consecutively in 1 week up on the Temple Mount, one on the Lion Gate and one on the Cotton Gate. And I actually work very closely with the Israeli police in East Jerusalem, and have met with these men and have spoken to them, and hearing their stories and hearing their challenges to keep the peace on the Temple Mount. And they're not doing it for Israel. They're keeping the peace. The Israeli police officers are trying to keep the peace for both Muslims to have freedom of worship on the Temple Mount, as also the Jewish people, and as also Christian visitors and so on. So they're in the middle here, and I care very much about how that affects them, what I do. And that's always in the back of my mind. We got to be very careful how we tread on these issues, and don't cause more harm for these wonderful men who are literally laying down their lives for the peace up on the Temple Mount.
Yeah. When you look at the site itself, it once hosted the temple. There is, the Temple Institute, as you mentioned. They're trying to build the temple up there. How do you look at that? Will it happen, do you think?
Well, I'll put it this way. The simple version, the simple, my simple version is it's not about a structure, it's not about building a third temple, it's about having the freedom to pray up on the Temple Mount is kind of the key. And I see that as an important, timeline in prophetic history before Messiah comes. That it seems that there's going to be a time where the Jewish people will have a third temple to pray at. If we merit, to see that day, then yes. But is it going to be a structure? Is it going to just be an open air, freedom to pray up there? I don't know. I really don't know, because it's not very clear from the prophets or the scriptures that we have. But if history repeats itself, and I think that's something that's very key in prophetic history and how it repeats itself, you have the Hanukkah story, and you have the Jewish people who are allowed to pray up on the Temple Mount under the Greco-Assyrian Empire, and but then it got taken over, and then they had to fight to cleanse it and get it back. So I think that's what we're seeing today is a repeat of that history, is a battle for this holy place. And I definitely believe it's God's will that the Jewish people have access to pray there, because one of the scriptures says is that when you pray on the Temple Mount, you will have security all around, it says. And so that's a very important understanding, that if we want peace in the Middle East, then you have to have the freedom to pray on the Temple Mount, because I think that's a key factor, scripturally speaking.
Interesting. What else can you tell me about your work?
Well, part of what we're doing, besides having the Temple Mount Report, which is a program that we have, where we have top experts in the fields from both Christians and Jews discuss the issue of the Temple Mount, we're also having a planned every 2 years or so to have a Temple Mount convention. And we had our first one in 2018. We had our second one planned for 2020. And because of COVID, the whole thing got, botched, so to speak. And God willing, now that the borders are opening, our plan is this year, sometime around Hanukkah time, because we feel the season of Hanukkah is a very important season to teach on this, because that's, like I said, as far as prophetic history repeating itself, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
And so that's our goal. Is we'll announce the dates shortly, but that's what we're focusing now that the borders are open, and we can do that.
So that will be a physical event, or
God willing, that's what we're looking to do. Yeah, because we don't feel it's good to have like a Zoom style, like many conferences have been doing, and kind of getting on with COVID. I think what's important with our convention is the interaction, because it's the only convention you'll ever see, and I think historically has ever happened, where, I mean, it's groundbreaking. You have Jews and Christians coming together on a subject that we can agree on. It doesn't mean we're going to agree on everything, of course, because Christians have their, worldview and Jews have theirs. But the fact that there's a debate going on and trying to learn from each other, I think that interaction is very, very key and important. So we want to have a physical event, and that's what we're focusing on.
Well, I wish you all the best and God's blessing with your work here around the Temple Mount. We are not going to meet your brother-in-law, actually, who is also working together with you on this topic. So thank you very much, Doron.
Thank you.
Then I want to welcome Johannes Enarson to this program as well. You are, together with Doron, part of the leadership in Cry for Zion. How did you get involved with this?
Yes, I'm the Christian director, and I got involved through Doron, and he started explaining that he felt that this was a very important topic. And at that time, I thought the Temple Mount was for crazy people who wanted to blow up the Dome of the Rock, for extremists. But I took him seriously, and I started to investigate the topic, and I was very surprised to find out how central the Temple Mount issue is to the Bible. It's definitely the holiest place in the world, biblically speaking. Old Testament, New Testament, whichever way you look at it, it's the holiest place on earth. God calls it his throne on the earth. And we talk about the promise that the angel Gabriel gave to Mary that Jesus will inherit the throne of his father David and reign there forever. Well, King David didn't have a throne in heaven, but his son Solomon inherited his throne, and it was on the Temple Mount right next to the temple. That is the very holiest place in the world. And so looking into it, starting to learn about it, you know, Israel, if we still consider Israel to be a special land, that there is a holy area of the earth, then Jerusalem is the holy city, and it's still special in God's eyes. Well, is Mount Zion, the Temple Mount, is that still holy in God's eyes? And I think that it is. In fact, I think it's Mount Zion that makes Jerusalem special, and Jerusalem makes the land special in a certain way. It's like the Holy of Holies of everything. And it's also something of a prophetic time clock. If you look at the destruction of Israel, first the land was destroyed by the Romans, then backing up, reverse. First, the Romans really destroyed the temple in 70 AD.
Yeah.
And then there was a second Jewish revolt, and Jerusalem was crushed in an extra way of just being really destroyed even more.
Yeah, the Bar Kokhba
The Bar
revolt.
Kokhba revolt,
Yeah.
not long after, 135 around there. And then the land was also made desolate. If we look now at the restoration of Israel, first the land has been restored in 1948, but Jerusalem was not allowed to be in the picture just as things developed. But 50 years after that, in 1967, in that war, a very miraculous war, Jerusalem was restored to the Jewish people. But through certain events that happened in that miraculous war, the Temple Mount was not, the keys to the Temple Mount were given back to the Jordanian Muslim Waqf, the Muslim custodians, through very strange events. But it's been 50 years, over 50 years since that time, and that status quo is still an anomaly, an exception in the state of Israel. So it's the heart of the capital of Israel, but the flag of Israel is not allowed to fly on the Temple Mount. So even for people who care about Israel, it's the Temple Mount is the most Jewish site in the whole land. Most history, most connections, it's the holiest place for all Jews. But if Jews can't have their rights, fly their flag, or pray openly to God, why should they have rights in Tel Aviv or Haifa that are not as significant sites in their history? So the whole argument for Israel kind of stands and falls on the Temple Mount. And then you also see the prophetic time clock. We like to say that it's like a big clock, that if Israel is like the hour hand going around, then Jerusalem is like the minute hand showing what's happening, but the Temple Mount is like the seconds, tick, tick. That's where it's all focused.
Yeah. So the significance of the Temple Mount is, important then. But from a theological viewpoint, from the Christian view, does it really matter for us?
That's a really good question. When we first started getting involved, we asked different Christian leaders who care about Israel to support prayer and freedom for the Jewish people and their sovereignty on the Temple Mount. And they said, my prayer closet is holier than the Temple Mount. Now everything is holy. Everything is universal. God is done with the temple. I like to think of the temple as the last stronghold of replacement theology. It really is. Even people who reject replacement theology, that God has not replaced the Jewish people or canceled their covenant, still, with Jesus, the temple is out of the picture. I think that if you look at the honest evidence of the New Testament, Jesus loved the temple. He called it my Father's house. when he cleansed it from people who were corrupt, the disciples said that zeal for the house has consumed him, quoting the Psalms. Then if you look into the book of Acts, it was the daily meeting place of all the disciples, of the apostles, and especially in Acts chapter 21, Paul, even after writing his famous letters, many of them on his final visit to Jerusalem, he offered sin sacrifices in the temple. So the apostles did not understand the temple to be in conflict with the atonement at the cross. Far from it. And the book of Hebrews is very clear that the temple sacrifices never gave anyone eternal salvation. In fact, all through scriptures, whether it's Abraham or Moses, no one was saved by the temple. You're saved by faith and repentance. So the temple has powerful illustrations, but it never was in conflict with the cross. That's something that Christian theology has added later in its interpretation, saying, the temple was destroyed. It's a proof that Jesus is right, Christians are right, and it must always be destroyed to show that we're right. I don't think that's God's way of looking at it. It's not the way that the prophets look at it, or the New Testament.
In Christian circles, it's been claimed that, the curtain in the Holy of the Holiest, when it was
ripped in
two, it was an act of God. Because it was from the top down, and that symbolizes that the significance of the temple is over. How do you counter such a word?
It's definitely a miraculous event that happens in the Gospels, but it's not interpreted. It doesn't say what it means. Then we look at Acts and we see what the apostles, how they viewed the temple, how they loved it. Jesus loved it, and they participated, they prayed there. Paul would even participate and pray there and offer sacrifices. That event, I think, can be interpreted two ways. One can be it's ripped, the temple is over and done with, even though the apostles didn't think so. His disciples didn't think so, but it happened. I like to think of it as what happens when a Jewish father sees his son die. What does he do? He rips his clothes because of sorrow and anguish. So when Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? And he dies. I mean, we see the agony of Jesus, but what about the agony of the Father? I think the Father really felt it and ripped the curtain.
That's such a powerful picture. Yeah, okay, that's a very powerful picture actually, that explains what took place. Because the significance of the temple at that time, the Ark of the Covenant wasn't even there, but still it was important for Jesus, right?
Jesus loved it. He was presented there when he was young. He stayed there when he was 12, and when he was older, he still called it my Father's house, and he was passionate and zealous for it. But it had no Ark of the Covenant in it. Many of the high priests were very corrupt. Even the whole building had been remodeled from the ground up by the wicked King Herod, who tried to kill him. So despite all the political and religious problems, Jesus saw past all of that and still loved it and knew this was God's house. No matter what anybody says, it's not the Antichrist temple, it's not an abomination temple, it is God's house. That even whatever political or religious corruption happens there, Jesus still sees it as the house of his Father in heaven.
And you expect it to be rebuilt?
I think that biblically, I don't know how it would happen in modern history or how long it would take, but I think definitely that the prophetic move in the scriptures in the New Testament, that we have strong hints that it will appear, just like the state of Israel has been restored before Messiah comes. So the temple will also be restored when Messiah comes. And the question is, how will the Christian world react? Will they react that it is an abomination or that God is in this?
And you, of course, think that this will be an act of God, then?
I definitely, just as I do with the state of Israel. Some Christians consider the state of Israel to be a political abomination. in our world, I think it's a positive act of God, even if it's messy, if it's painful, if it's a process, that God is in it. It's a miracle, and it's one of the strongest proofs that He is acting in our world today.
Yeah. One thing for sure is that the times we're living is actually encouraging us to be more attentive to the Word of God and the prophetic light and the expectation of Jesus' return. You know, that's what I feel in these times.
Yeah.
What is the next move for your organization, Cry for Israel, Cry for Zion?
So we have two approaches. One is we want to support the right of the Jewish people to pray on the Temple Mount. It's very, very important, and I encourage people to know about that. The second that we do is education. So we have a lot of top experts, we have events, we have YouTube videos, and that we promote, and we're also working and we're asking for people's support for a big film, an epic film, to display the Temple Mount, the mountain of the King, Mount Zion, in a way that's never been presented to people before. So pray for us. It's right in the process of still filming and production, so people can look forward to that.
Yeah, I'm looking very much forward to that film. Thank you very much, John, for your participation in this program, and I wish you the blessings of God in all your work here.
Thank you.
Ja, det var altså det vi rakk for denne gangen. Tusen takk for at du har fulgt oss med dette programmet, og på gjensyn igjen neste uke. Takk for nå.